When I read this, however many weeks ago this came out, I went through so many stages with this. When I saw once per turn, I was losing it. It was over. I was done. And then I was like, all right, at higher levels, it goes up. Thank God. Because you
does more
cast
damage,
spells
yeah.
at higher levels automatically as a warlock. The warlock class, and then bam, it's over. I'm done. It's ruined.
Welcome to Monsters of Multiclass. I'm Ellie.
I'm Jared Bornagle.
And I'm Will Meldon.
And on this episode, we are taking a look at the new Warlock from One D&D that came out in the recent UA, the Player Handbook Playtest 5 packet, releasing here in early 2023 if you're popping into this, like years from now, because I'm sure there will be different discussions to be had. We already kind of briefly gave our overview thoughts on this in a general overview video. Links at the top if you haven't checked that out, of the entire playtest packet, and we did talk about Warlocks a bit, but now we're going to dive in depth in our usual fashion, going through each feature, dissecting them, that sort of fun stuff, so stick around.
Yes, so let's just start off on kind of the very basics of what has changed with the Warlock, and that is that, and we'll get more into the spellcasting, talk about it in detail, but I think this entire conversation really needs to start here, and that is Pact Magic has disappeared. And Warlock spellcasting has been replaced with what is a more classic half-caster spell progression, meaning that they no longer get their spell slots back on a short rest. This is going to have effects on just about everything from invocations to their class progression. So I feel like even though that's not level 1 thing talked about, it really does need to be brought up pretty early on here. So let's go ahead and start with the first level stuff. The changes to skills, proficiencies, most of that isn't really different, but we do have one change, and that is a new proficiency in medium armor by default. Before, this is something that you'd have to, I believe, take Pact Weapon to even
Hexblade.
get. It was Hexblade was the only way to get medium armor.
Sure,
there we
yeah.
go. And this overall seems to be a direction moving away towards needing Hexblade as a class. We'll see if that ends up coming through. We only get one subclass in this playtest, and Hexblade was in Xanathars anyways, so I doubt we'll see it in the player's handbook. But medium armor going to the Warlock obviously is beneficial to both spellcasters and ones looking to go the martial route, but not sure if there's any larger changes that you all can think of with them getting medium armor.
I do just like the design philosophy, because from the ground up, Warlocks were built as having the option to be kind of melee martial class with spell casting, with the Pact of the Blade feature being in there from the beginning in the player handbook. But then they could only get light armor, and then it almost felt like if that's what you wanted to do, you had to play Hexblade and miss out on the other options. Otherwise, you were like super far behind, because Pact of the Blade just wasn't enough on its own. And this is one of the steps to make that more viable, to be a melee martial focused Warlock without having to be a Hexblade Warlock. And then there's another feature that we'll get to soon here that does that as well. So overall, I'm a fan of that change. I know it seems really small, but I think it just really does open up that kind of flexibility.
Yeah, I think it is interesting in terms of the multi-classing, making Warlock a potentially strong pick because of the fact that now you can choose which primary ability you want to use depending on the Pact boon that you pick, which I'll just use as a segue here. The Pact boons now with Blade, Chain, and Tome allow you to choose your spell casting ability. So with Pact of the Blade, you can use Wisdom or Charisma. With Chain, it's Intelligence or Charisma. And then Pact of the Tome, it's Intelligence or Wisdom, actually not even giving you Charisma as an option officially. So that does mean giving medium armor at first level has some multi-classing implications, because a wizard could take a 1-level dip into Warlock, do Pact of the Tome or Pact of the Chain, whichever one makes more sense, and then use Intelligence. It's very easy for them to justify that dip. I don't have really a strong opinion as whether or not that's good or bad, but it definitely changes things up.
I'm always for more synergy like that with multi-classing, because we're the multi-classing podcast, so obviously we like it. Well, 2 out of 3 of us do.
We do have somebody on the podcast who specifically has gone on record saying, I hate multi-classing. Everyone who multi-classing is a big nerd.
Everyone who multi-classing is big nerd.
Right. Thank you for backing that up.
So I just like opening that up more. Specifically with Pact Boons, they also come online at first level now. Previously, you got your subclass at first and Pact Boon at third, and they swapped it, which I'm okay with. It's subclass at third is more in line with, it's 100% in line with what One D&D is doing. It's all classes now get subclass at third, which I pros and cons with that. That just general kind of design philosophy switch in general, but it does
weird from a role-playing perspective. I don't like subclasses coming online at third, but from a mechanic standpoint, I love that it's at least consistent across the board, that everyone gets it at third. Makes it a little more easy to explain, but it still feels odd, right? Like we talked about that with paladins, where they take this big oath at third level. And so what are you doing the first 2 levels? Or do you not have that oath, or are you just kind of dabbling with your oath? And it's the same thing with the warlock here, where usually when you think of a warlock, there is some massive event that occurs, right? That ties you to this patron. It's not something usually that you're just kind of dabbling in and then it fully unlocks at third level. You obviously can play it that way, especially with like Pact of the Tome or something, where you find a book and you're looking through it and you're like, oh wow, this is really interesting stuff, and ooh, I'm gaining power from this. And then at third level you fully form that connection and fully make that dedication, if you would. But it does kind of railroad you into that, instead of, if it is at first level, you have the full openness.
Mechanically, I like it a lot because it's such a common design thing, and it just has a satisfying feeling of it. If you start out general, then as you get higher, you specialize into something that even goes beyond games. Roleplay wise, I think there's plenty of ways to do it. I agree with you. Paladin falls short and feels a little weird. I think Cleric does too, because they don't really give you anything in the first 2 levels. Warlock, I think, is a good template of how to handle it, where the Pact Boon does cover that, because with the Pact Boon, you are picking basically what your patron is. And the idea is it's kind of like this light contract initially of you receive a boon from this patron, and then as you've proven yourself to them, you enter a full pact with them and get that subclass at third level. And it's just kind of, so yeah, it does kind of kick that big moment a little bit down the line, but not really. Like,
yeah.
And also, if you're just starting like a new campaign, you're coming in with a character, a lot of campaigns or adventures just don't start at level 1. You start at level 3 is a really common one anyways. Skip the first 2. We always do that. And then it doesn't even matter.
Yeah, it's definitely not the end of the world. And as I said, the fact that it's consistent across all of the classes now, it's like, that's just the way it is. You kind of have to deal with it. And it is worse for other classes. So yeah, it's like, whatever.
Yeah, Paladin, Cleric, and probably others, they need something they get right away at first that like connects them to a god or an oath in some way. They kind of like start them down that path and then really commit at third.
So something else with the Pact Boons that is pretty big change here is that Eldritch Blast and Hex now become class spells, things that you just automatically get for the Warlock. I think that was a very common thing discussed, because Eldritch Blast always felt like such an obvious pick for the Warlock. Hex, I'm a little on the fence about. I don't really love the Hex spell, and I don't know if we want to talk about that now or later, but definitely pretty interesting that they've made them now class features. It allows them to integrate more subclass abilities or even these pact abilities into whatever your Eldritch Blast or Hex is, now that it's assumed you'll have it.
Why don't you like the Hex spell?
I think Hex is a little underwhelming. It's 1d6 damage, which is not really a hex, and then the disadvantage on an ability check just doesn't come up often enough to really feel like it's worth the concentration. It's great if you have a grappler in the party, but otherwise it only comes up on things like Counterspell and Dispel Magic if the spell level's higher, and then you have to specifically hex on that, intelligence, charisma, wisdom, whatever that spellcaster is, which means you have to know what their spellcasting ability modifier is. It's overly situational, and for something that should be a hex, the idea of cursing somebody, it ends up not feeling like a curse and just feels like you're giving yourself extra damage.
Fun fact, it's no longer useful for grappling.
Oh, that is a fun fact.
Those are saving throws now.
Yeah.
Okay, so then my point just grows. It's really not interesting to give disadvantage on ability check in combat.
The hex part was always shit, and it's still shit. You're right.
Yeah, I was okay with it in 5th edition because it's a d6 in every attack roll. So like if you, as you're, even just like if you're doing 3 Eldritch Blast rolls at level 11, that's an extra 3d6 damage. It's pretty much, it's on par with Hunter's Mark, which is very much seen as a staple of the Ranger. And so now Hex is kind of the staple of the Warlock. I don't like how similar they are, though. I think a little more unique. This would have been nice. And I also agree the concentration could kind of suck because there are other cool spells to concentrate on. In 1D&D here, they changed Hex, so it's 1d6 once per turn. Everything else is the same, best I could tell. And so that really sucks. That all of a sudden makes it just super not worth it.
When I read this, however many weeks ago this came out, I went through so many stages with this. When I saw once per turn, I was losing it. It was over. I was done. And then I was like, all right, at higher levels, it goes up. Thank God. Because you cast more damage, spells at higher levels automatically as a warlock. The warlock class, and then bam, it's over. I'm done. It's ruined.
That's about where I'm at. It's really not worth it. I've never once heard somebody say too that like, oh man, I would love to cast some other 5th level spells, but I need to use Hex at 5th level so I can maintain concentration for 24 hours. It's just not a good use of your concentration. It's silly. And in the same way that I have the feeling with like favored foe being concentration, it's like maybe if this is going to be a class staple, maybe it just doesn't need to be concentration. And then we can balance the damage around it not being concentration.
Let's go into what we were talking about, where they gave you Eldritch Blast and Hex as class feature spells. Mm-hmm. This is great. Now they can modify Hex and Eldritch Blast without worrying about it not covering most warlocks or whatever. They kind of did this. They kind of did this in the expanded invocations list from whatever that
Tasha's
was. Yeah. Where you could like follow people that were hexed. That was dope.
Yeah.
You could teleport as a bonus action behind the hex target. That's not, they haven't gotten all that stuff in yet. I assume it's going to be coming. It's sad that it's mixing. There are some things, but there's nothing all that cool in there.
Yeah. With it being something that is baked into the class now, you almost expect that though. So them not having it is like, if this is all we have to go on, then why is Hex here? Why am I supposed to be excited about having Hex as part of this when I can't even modify it? In the same way that Eldritch Blast, it was always cool. There were so many invocations to modify your Eldritch Blast. And I say many, but people usually ended up taking the same, like 2, which was Agonizing Blast and the one that let you pull or push them. But but
that's all been fixed. We'll get there. But the class features should have extended Hex. You should have invocations. You should be able to give disadvantage on even high level stuff like attack rolls and saving throws. That would be absolutely nuts for like a 18th level class feature. Hint, hint. But this is where they kind of struck out. And so, spoiler alert, they don't really get this right.
But so then the actual meat of the Pact Boon, Pact Boon, is the different choices you can make of the Pact Weapon, Pact of the Blade, Pact of the Chain, and Pact of the Tome. They now give you, this is when you pick the spellcast ability as talked about, and then they give you a Pact Spell, which is just replacing the features that were written in 5th edition. So it's just kind of, we talked about it in the overview one, where it just seems kind of a bit of a messy design choice making these spells, but whatever, I guess.
I guess you can have your Pact Weapon dispelled now. It's a little weird.
Yeah, I guess you could. Gross. Okay, so Pact of Blade gives you Pact Weapon, which is a cantrip. It's a casting time of 1 action and its duration 24 hours. So it's just something you could redo this over and over. Where it's same sort of flavor. You create a Pact Weapon. It can't have the heavy property, or you could be holding on to a magic weapon that doesn't have the heavy property and make that your Pact Weapon. This is a very much beefed up from 5th editions, where it doesn't give you a ton of cool stuff. It's more about summoning it into your hand and then opening up invocations for it. This one gives you just straight up that slot of Hexblade features such as Eldritch Warrior, where you could use your spellcasting ability to modify your attack rolls and damage rolls instead of strength or dex. So again, another step in that direction of not having to go Hexblade to make a melee or martial focused Warlock.
Yeah.
So good step there. You also then get proficiency in the weapon. That's the same. And returning weapon, where you can actually, this was a little different. If the weapon has the thrown property, the weapon returns to your hand immediately after hitting or missing a target. So again, just kind of more of their changes of trying to get thrown weapons a little more viable. If that's something you want to do. It does then upgrade at 5th level, where you then automatically get extra attack. Which just works like any other extra attack, which is really nice, where you don't have previously had to pick an invocation. It was very much an invocation tax. If you were trying to be a martial focused warlock, you pretty much had to take that invocation. Otherwise you're falling behind. It's now all automatic.
Sorry, it was also at 6th level though.
Oh,
that invocation was only available at 6th. So
yeah,
we're making it a little more in line with your martials. So I like that. I think it works well with the other changes.
Yeah. All right, then Pact of the Chain gives you the Pact of Familiar, the Pact Familiar spell, which is all, again, very similar in flavor, where you get a special familiar. You pick the type of it, like Aberration, Celestial, Dragon, Fae, Fiend, or whatever, and you do that when you cast the spell. And this is another cantrip that costs an hour to cast, so you could kind of do this over and over and over again if you want. If you change it up, it's the same familiar, like it just morphs in the new one. It has the same memories and stuff like that. It now acts on your turn immediately after your initiative. Was that different?
That is different.
Okay.
Yeah, I just played a warlock, and the familiar officially was supposed to have its own initiative.
Oh, right, because you just get to find familiar spell.
Yes.
Previously, yeah. So yeah, then that very much has its own initiative, which is messy, and I do not like that. So that's a little cleaner and very common what you see with like companions and summons and beasts and stuff you could control. And it will either take the dodge and move action, unless in this case you use your reaction to command it. It's supposed to do your bonus action, which is a common thing we see. I kind of like that. Free up your bonus action, which warlocks do have some uses for, and use your reaction, which you usually don't have a ton for. You just save it for the familiar's turn. How it dies and all that's kind of the same. At 5th, all these get like an upgrade. At 5th, you can communicate telepathically with your familiar as long as you two are on the same plane of existence. Additionally, while perceiving through your familiar senses, you could also speak through your familiar in your own voice. Also, there's no longer a limit on the remote viewing. The Find Familiar spell has a 100-foot limit on remote viewing. This one is just on the same plane of existence.
So another...
Actually, no, it doesn't even say that. As a magic action, you can see where your familiar sees and hears. Yeah, it doesn't even have that limitation.
So once again, we are seeing a time where a invocation is no longer necessary. The investment of the Chainmaster was one that I think, was that come around in Tasha's investment of the Chainmaster? Not entirely important right now, but it like beefed up your familiar so that you could, command it as a bonus action to take the attack. Well, now you can really do that as a reaction, and it's baked into that Pact of the Chain. So a couple of these things where it no longer feels like you have to take the invocation. I think we also see it with the saving throw. If it forces one, does it force one with the actions? Eldritch Strike just does damage. That's all that it does. Yep, that sounded nice and rambly. I don't know where to start from that.
You kind of lost me. I'm not sure what you're trying to say.
I'm trying to say that investment of the Chainmaster is no longer necessary because you can use a reaction to command the attack. But we do still have a couple of things being lost because Find Familiar doesn't force a saving throw anymore. With investment of the Chainmaster, you could use your spell save DC instead of the creature's spell save DC, or save DC on whatever that ability was, but the Pact Familiar just takes away any saving throws entirely. So it's kind of just a change on it entirely. So yes, you don't need to take the invocation anymore, but that's also because the Familiar is just not as strong.
No, these just replaced it with Favor of the Chainmaster. I don't think investment of the Chainmaster is currently in here at all. So I guess we're jumping around a little bit, unless I'm missing it. Again, just how this is organized is really hard to quickly search it and keep it all in your head. I'm not seeing investment of the Chainmaster listed here. Yeah, with Favor of the Chainmaster, it gives each familiar type something like that, like Slowing Slime, Guiding Light, Draconic Might.
But that's now a 9th level thing instead of a 1st level.
Yeah.
So
or 2nd level.
Spoiler alert: they gave you a stat block. You get a stat block.
Yeah.
Yep. Which is in line with all summons.
Yeah, that's the direction they're obviously going to go with everything. It's a little flavorless, but I'm glad that they did add, as you said, this now 9th level thing where you turn whatever type you have into a thing that you can use. You get your little abilities. It is a little late, but they're pretty good. They're fun, at least.
Yeah. The stat block, we're not going to read it. But it's kind of basics. What you would expect out of like a summoning stat block now, where things increase by your like spellcasting modifier, your proficiency bonus, or spell level, with like AC and hit points, couple of condition immunities. They have a basic attack, which is like 2 plus half your warlock level to hit, and then it does the damage type based on what it is. Like aberrations do acid, celestials do radiant. I'm sorry, it's your spell attack modifier to hit, and then for damages 2 plus half your warlock level on a hit. And then it could also turn invisible. So it's nothing all that exciting. They definitely took away the uniqueness with the stat block.
It's a pretty good use of your reaction, though. I mean, instead of it being a bonus action, it's free damage. And then if you take that 9th level ability, it can be pretty useful. The big thing, though, is the health. I believe that's higher now, too.
I know, like, the 5 familiar spell, they all have 1 health. I think Warlocks get something boosted to that, or maybe that's where they have to take one of the...
Warlocks get to pick their special ones. So you get, like, a Quasit, for instance, which has, like, 7 HP. Yeah, it has 7 HP. Which is, 7 times more than a regular owl, but it's still...
it's still 1 hit, anything past 5th level.
It doesn't really matter in the long term.
Yeah. This one still is not much. It's 5 plus your Warlock level.
It's better at...
So, like, at level 20, it's 25 health. That's still kind of 1-hit territory.
Yeah. Not much to do about that.
Yeah. Its AC is higher, though, too, I'm pretty sure. 10 plus your spellcasting ability modifier.
Definitely
higher, actually, that caps out at 15. Never mind. It's ability modifier, not spellcasting attack roll. So the proficiency is better. It actually caps out at 15.
Bad, but it's better.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't cap out at 15, at level 20 at least, because that is a big thing now, is that you're kind of expected to boost your spellcasting ability modifier, usually past +5 at level 20. But most of the time, you're right, it's going to be 15 for 90% of play. 98% of play.
93.7% of play is going to cover this.
Yeah, overall, I don't like the Pact Familiar changes.
Why?
But I was also not a huge fan of them in 5th edition either, where there just felt like a real lack of usefulness. These things were very fragile, died easily, but then you're like sinking like a whole major class feature into them, so you just get really protective of that familiar, and then they're not used a ton. Like we're seeing that right now in our campaign, where one of our players multi-class to a Warlock, took Pact of the Chain. She even got a special familiar kind of made for her, working with you, Jared. And it's like, it's almost never used because it's like really situational what you would use that on, and she doesn't want it to constantly just be killed.
I will see if it gets used more. A lot of fights we've had recently with it being literally underwater made that a bit difficult to justify using the familiar. We'll see long term. I've used a Pact of the Chain Warlock. Actually, I've played one. Most times I've played a Warlock for whatever reason. And when they have a good saving throw ability combined with that investment of the Chain Master, being able to force a saving throw can be really great. I believe which one is it? Okay, there it is. The Pseudo Dragon has a really cool ability, which is the Sting. And if the target fails a DC 11 Constitution saving throw, become poisoned for 1 hour. If they fail by 5 or more, the target falls unconscious for the same duration. Obviously, that DC 11 is nothing impressive, but combined with the investment of the Chain Master, that made it extremely worthwhile to use your bonus action to either poison them, which alone is really great, especially since they don't get an additional saving throw. It's just they're poisoned forever. And then if you can make them unconscious, it was borderline overpowered. But that's kind of one situation. I didn't feel like, Imp and Quasit and Sprite all had equally as powerful things. We are not seeing that, though, until 9th level now, regardless. So it's definitely a just a different comparison.
And these are just riders on their attacks, and none of them are like that strong. It still hits for a pretty small amount of damage, and then like, I mean, I'm sure the target has a poison condition till the end of your next turn. Like, so I guess that's kind of there, but
for the pseudo dragon, it's poison for 1 hour.
No, I'm talking about in 1D&D.
In 1D&D.
In 1D&D, yes. That's what I'm saying. And currently in 1D&D. So yeah, I guess I was kind of saying I didn't love it in 5th. Sure, there's some situations you can make it work in your advantage. But now in here, they kind of took most of those away. Also, like the ability to cast touch spells through the familiar is gone because this is not the Find Familiar spell. It's its own unique thing now. And it does not say it does that. So it doesn't do it.
That is sad. That's a really hard thing to lose because I think that's one of the best parts of it, being able to get that positioning.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I know. I would almost rather go like Book of Shadows, Pact of the Tome, and like pick the Find Familiar spell, and then get the other things Pact of the Tome gives you.
Well, let's talk about what Pact of the Tome gives you.
I was going to say, all right, so that gives you the Book of Shadows, which is now a cantrip, which feels weird, but whatever. I'm not going to keep beating that one to death. 1 hour to cast, so you can redo this within a day because it's just a cantrip. When you cast it, you get additional cantrips and ritual spells. So when the book appears, choose 2 cantrips and choose 2 first-level spells that have the ritual tag. They can be from the Arcane Divine and Primal spell list, so any spell, really, which is nice. And they must be spells you don't already have prepared, which makes sense. I don't know why you do this if you already have them prepared. Well, this book is any person, you have the chosen spells prepared. You could use it as spellcasting focus, and then it upgrades at 5th level. When the book is any person, you could add your Warlock spellcasting ability modifier to the damage rolls of any cantrip you cast that doesn't already have that modifier added to its damage roll, which is a nice feature. So it's similar to what the Pact of the Tome gives you in 5th edition, but in 5th edition, it's just cantrips. You get 3 cantrips, and that's really all it does. I think you could use it as a focus, but it doesn't like up damage or anything like that. Just 3 cantrips from any list. And then there's invocations to be able to get like ritual stuff in here. This just gives that up front. So again, less of a ritual tax. You still get 2 cantrips, and then the 2 first level spells that have a ritual tag is nice. And then again, upgrading the cantrip damage is nice for the Warlock.
Yeah, it makes it so that you don't need to take something like Agonizing Blast at 5th level to make your Eldritch Blast, I'll say, worthwhile. Really just makes it extremely strong, which is fine because we all love Eldritch Blast.
Right. So this is actually very interesting because the lack of tax actually really helps if you are still going for the Supercaster Warlock. Because back in the day, the Pact of the Tome was how you fleshed out the fact that you could only cast like 2 spells per day if your DM wasn't passing out short rests like candy. You had no utility as a warlock, so you got it through the Book of Shadows or the Pact of the Tome. Now you lose the requirement to get that invocation to make your hex worthwhile, so you can use the new features to get even more spells. So this really feeds back into itself.
The only thing, and we brought this up, I think, in the overview, is it just starts making it samey to the wizard. There's still that issue going on of all these like casters are starting to just be pushed closer and closer together and feeling really similar. And this is just another one of those things. They could be, if you go Pact of the Tome, you could become an intelligence caster. You pick Book of Shadows. You could pick from the arcane list. Well, Warlocks do that anyways. Get additional spells, additional cantrips. The ability to, with just 1 hour of time, and you can even do it this middle of the day, so it's actually, I think, a little even better than what wizards can do, change these spells as well. So it's like makes you like a pseudo preparation caster with some different styles of flexibility. I guess they have to be 1st level though, so that does keep it limited. It's just, again, just kind of pushing towards.
That's actually kind of interesting because you're right, with the casting time of 1 hour, and it's not like this is a once per day thing you can cast. You can really have every single ritual spell in the entire game just as long as you have enough time to prepare it. At 1st level, every single 1st level ritual spell.
No, the book disappears if you cast the spell again or die. So every time you cast it, it just like replaces it.
That's what I'm saying though. But like if a situation arises and you're like, ooh, I wish I had this 1st level ritual spell. As long as you have the time, you can get access to it, which is something I really don't like. I don't like when things can just be solved with, oh, we've got enough time. It puts a lot of pressure on the DM to constantly make time crunches, which often restricts the freedom of choice in role playing. And I really don't like time crunches unless it is a specific event. So not really huge on that. I feel like if this wants to be somewhat limited, this needs to be like a once per day you can cast this spell, and then you're at least stuck with those spells that you choose in the morning.
Yeah. There's not a ton of ritual stuff though.
No,
Like,
there's
like
not.
alarm, comprehend languages, find familiars on there.
But comprehend languages is an entire
Identify.
invocation. Well, okay, that's to read things, I believe, but
Yeah.
it still just feels wrong to me to just like, again, you've got enough time, great, I can switch things out and have whichever ritual makes sense here. I think identify is on that list too, isn't it, as a first level?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a huge one. I mean, identify gets tons of use in our game at minimum, but I feel like that's one that most people do. So I don't know, not huge on that.
It's also a kind of weird replacement for the Book of Ancient Secrets pact feature where you used to be able to do the wizard book thing where you could inscribe new stuff. That's not really there anymore.
Oh, right. You could learn new rituals. Yeah.
Which was always at the behest of the DM, whether you actually ever got anything, which is frustrating for a lot of people. So, but I generally agree that the hour thing, it seems weird, and it seems like a thing that should be per day.
Yeah. Like a cantrip that's cast on a long rest.
Or more just like a class feature where it says you can do this once per day after a long rest.
Yeah.
No. But then you'd have to put all of them back into the class features. Whatever will we do?
You said there weren't like too many. Just to go through really quick, because there's probably about a dozen or so first level ritual spells: alarm, ceremony, comprehend language, detect magic, detect poison, find familiar, floating disc, identify, illusory script, purify food and drink, speak with animals, and unseen servant. I would say that's actually a lot of situations able to be covered.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
All right, so pack boons, obviously a lot of changes to that. I think the big, at least my big takeaway, is that they tried to balance them out a little bit, maybe succeeded in some spots, but also tried to take away the need to choose an invocation for each of them. Mm-hmm. In terms of the spell casting, this we talked about at the front. Obviously, major change here of them no longer being packed magic. I'd say that them being preparation casters is different, but they can only change their prepared spells on a level up. So that's
it's
really,
just one. It's just I don't know why they call them prepared spells. It's not. It's spells known, and it's exactly the same. On a level up, they can swap one spell they know with another of appropriate level. It is no different. I don't know why it says prepared.
I don't either.
Yeah, we missed that on the overview, so sorry about that for the confusion there.
In terms of the spells known, it is on paper the same amount in their class progression at the exact same times. Mystic Arcanum, the invocation will change that up a little bit. I don't know if we want to go through absolutely every Eldritch invocation, but that is what the second level thing is. Say no change there from the perspective of you get 2 invocations at second level. The only immediate thing to talk about without getting into the individual invocations is that you now get an additional invocation at 11th level instead of 12th level. So your progression is just a little bit faster in those mid tiers, so that you end up with 9 at the capstone, if you would, instead of 8. So that ends up really having a lot of, we'll say, mathematical implications in terms of how many invocations you can take, when you can take them, what you're taking, because Mystic Arcanum is now a pretty major invocation that warlocks are going to be taking at least once or twice, if not more.
One big thing with the invocations, any that's kind of covered by Mystic Arcanum of you get like a higher level spell, they just got rid of it. So that kind of cleaned up the list a lot. A lot of them are the same or tweaked a bit, but they did definitely add some kind of like big new ones for the packed boons. So actually it was kind of interesting. We were saying like they take away the invocation tax by like putting a lot of those invocations into the packed boon at first level. They just put new stuff in. So they're still kind of there, like the favor of the chain master that we talked about. Also a 9, like these are all 9s too. Gift of the Protectors, which is you need a Pact of the Tome one where new page appears in your Book of Shadows. With your permission, a creature can use its action to write its name on the page, which contain a number of names. Oh, this is actually the same. When any creature whose name is on the page is reduced to 0 hit points, but not killed outright, the creature magically drops to 1 hit point instead. That actually already exists, but it's still just like a really solid feature. Kind of feels like a bit of attacks. 9th level Life Drinker for Pact of the Blade is, I don't know, I think it is the same, where you do 1d6 necrotic damage extra on a hit, and in addition, the first time
charisma.
Okay, yeah, then you heal that back.
Which was actually accidentally busted.
It was also 12th level, so now it's 9th.
Because you added 5 more, up to 5 more necrotic damage to a packed weapon attack, which could also theoretically add, and in practice add, whatever you're hitting with, strength dex. So it was a little nuts. Now it's pretty toned down.
Yeah, I remember that. I played a Hexblade. I think we were 14th level for like a kind of a mini adventure, and I took Life Drinker, and I was a Hexblade and all that stuff. And yeah, he hit hard. The improved packed weapon where you could do stuff with a heavy property, so 2-handed. I think they got rid of that actually.
Well, yeah, because there's no Hexblade now, so there's no way to get heavy.
No, I think that was an invocation to be able to do that. Improved packed weapon was an old invocation where it lifted the restrictions on the packed weapon.
You are correct, yeah, because it would also allow you to do short bow, long bow, light crossbow, and heavy crossbow. So yeah,
I'm wondering if that's going to live in the new Hexblade class.
We'll see. Depends on if they even bring it out.
Have one. Yeah.
See you in 3 years.
Yeah. I'm personally fine if they don't, because I feel like the current, like what they have with Pact of the Blade has allowed for enough martial growth that you can get that feeling of being a, hex, not a hex caster. What am I starting to say? A warlock doing melee without it being so abusable by things like paladins. I guess it's still kind of pretty abusable because they can still do charisma. So I don't know. Maybe we'll see it. We'll see.
Right. And then the big thing we should talk about with invocations is how it's Mystic Arcanum is now an invocation. And 5th edition, I kind of covered it. Mystic Arcanum is stuff they automatically get. I don't remember what level it starts, but that's what allows you to get higher level spells, and you can cast it once per day for free. They basically made that an invocation. It works exactly the same, but now it's an invocation pick they have to pick again and again and again. And I really dislike that because it felt really necessary for the Warlock class to get access to these higher level spells so they keep up as spellcasters. And they kind of lost that. Or you have to trade out your invocations for that kind of like flexibility.
So I do think that they've, based on the slightly less invocation taxes, which I will stand by. I think even those 9th level ones are, yes, you're probably going to take them, but they're not as required. And the fact that you get one additional one, from what I've seen, it looks like with Mystic Arcanum, as long as you don't just fully take every single thing as a Mystic Arcanum, it kind of evens out, if not works out a little bit better. You're right, you do have to switch out your invocations. Basically, once you can get Mystic Arcanum at like 5th level from the start, you would take a 3rd level spell, because that's like the highest level one. But then as your Warlock level increases and you get access to 3rd level spells yourself, you no longer need a Mystic Arcanum for 3rd level. So you swap that one out for whatever the new current one is. I guess, what level do you get 3rd level spells? So like 7th
5th.
level?
3rd level spells? 5th, yeah.
For Warlock?
Oh, I just talking in general.
Okay, yeah. For a half caster, you get 3rd levels at 9th. So at 9th level, you swap out the Mystic Arcanum that you would have had for a 3rd level, and now you make it a 4th level. So
Right.
It like constantly keeps you at that point where you've got access to the spell level that you need. And even at 9th level, you should be able to take an additional invocation to get that 5th level, which puts you more on par with a full caster. So I'm going to reference the the optimizer Treant Monk just released a video on the Warlock and the spell slot progression. I'll say it took me from a like, oh my god, this is absolutely terrible, to like, okay, I think it actually works out all right. Basically showing that you really only need to take Mystic Arcanum at 20th level 4 times for your invocations to be in that similar kind of 3/4 caster for a Warlock. And then you've got, at that point, 5 invocations to play with to, meet your Warlock dreams of invocations. So that, with that idea of like only 4 Mystic Arcanum being taken to kind of match that 3/4 caster, doesn't bother me as much. I don't get that rumble in my tummy.
So they're losing 3 invocation choices. Because in 5th edition, you get 8 at level, if we're talking the mythical level 20, which doesn't have it anyways. You get 8 invocations and Mystic Arcanum as just a free class feature.
So you get an additional one. You lose your tax. So let's say that you get 2 free invocations in D&D 1, and you lose 4. So what do you get? You get to be a half caster.
Right, and being a half caster does obviously increase the spell versatility pretty substantially.
So that's this. I kind of agree with that. This is fine. What I kind of don't like is that you do have to kind of hot fix your class as you go through the levels. So you are going to be swapping out your Mystic Arcanums if you play this character even remotely optimized. It's
right. That's basically every other level, so it's pretty frequent.
The nice thing is it lets you optimize well. It just adds a bit of complexity. But it depends on playstyle. If you are a Warlock, you get up to 4 spells per short rest in D&D 5. Now you get 4 spells by level 5. Back in the day, it was level 17. Now, if you are able to bully your DM as a charismatic Warlock, you should be able to do this. Theoretically, that's infinity spells. So my personal belief was what they should have done.
Oh, you're talking about with short rests?
What they should have done is Pact of the Short Rest. Whereas you could take a feature that let you roll a die, and if the DM said, no, you can't take a short rest, you could intervene and say, yes, I did. I did not go this path.
I think what you're saying from a maybe layman's terms here is that a class feature that allowed them to just immediately get their spell slots back would have been pretty nice. And I agree. I think that was my original take as well, was that something that was like an action to get spell slots back twice a day. Then it just ignored the whole need for a short rest. So I don't agree or don't disagree. If that's where they wanted to keep things with Pact Magic, that's would have been a good direction for it. But I'm pretty confident that this half casting is going to stay. It's a gut feeling. I guess we'll see if I'm wrong.
Sure. And mathematically, it could, of course, work out the same. They could have also just made them full casters, and then there's no math to even work out. It's like, obviously, it keeps them up as casters, but it still kind of slaughters that class uniqueness.
It does
slaughters the coming back to it.
It does.
It does
actually.
Making them half casters, not having the different kind of resource management game of coming back on a short rest.
Okay, it does. You're right. It does definitely slash that uniqueness. I would say that with the invocations, it still keeps the class presence of a customizable caster, or even just a customizable class, which the Warlock has always been. That stays very much, because even if you want to, you could take literally no Mystic Arcanum and just go heavy into the martial side of things, and that's kind of where I'd put like the Hexblade as that would have been. And you can still meet that class fantasy, or you can do the total opposite, which is putting all of your invocations into the spell casting, taking Pact of the Tome, and then you do basically end up as a wizard. I wouldn't bother with that. But I guess having that option is okay for the most part.
Sure, yeah, it could still be, Warlock still has a uniqueness in the sense of being a customizable class with the Pact Boon subclass, and then the invocations. But I mean, that's shit I want to see in every class.
Then Ellie, I love you. Play Pathfinder. Yeah. Like, I have been having this debate with myself for obviously we've been having it as well, but just like every time I get that feeling that just it boils up and I'm like, but I want this with every class. And it's like, but they're not going to do it because that's not what this game is. Yeah. And we have to live with that. And just stew in it. And marshals aren't going to get battle master features because Wizards of the Coast is afraid of scaring off new people with complexity. And that leads to class distinction going away a little bit. So I think Warlocks do get to retain some of it just with the choice because they do have that choice. And I'm hoping that we see more invocations that make me a little more excited about those choices. Because right now, I'd say I'm on the fence. You know, like things like Will was talking about of being able to modify Hex, which we're not seeing. Those are the things that I think will make it, regardless, feel different from a wizard. And that we're missing still.
Sure. Okay.
Can we like swerve off the highway real quick for one of Will's yell about things rants? The answer is yes, we're going to do that. So you can modify Hex. When you cast Hex, its range is 600 feet and you have advantage on Constitution saving throws to maintain concentration on the spell. This is the least cool invocation ever. I hate that.
Yeah.
I left it out on purpose.
No, we're crashing down a hill. We're slamming into an embankment. At 18th level, we're skipping all the way there. You have mastered the Hex spell. You can cast Hex without expending a spell slot at first level.
I'd rather make it concentration free, but
I'd rather they just didn't do that. That sucks. If I'm casting it for free and it still sucks, it sucks. Make it better.
Yeah,
make it better, and then it's cool when it's free.
The most uninteresting capstone we've seen come out of One D&D so far.
Yeah. That is their capstone because it's 18th. Yeah. Right. Backing up, I did actually have an important point to make.
Please do.
About the class
before,
all
right, driving back onto the highway.
Go ahead.
I've definitely realized I've been really, really focused on the short rest casting of a Warlock, their Pact Magic, in terms of that's killing their class uniqueness. But you are right. There is that aspect there of the customizable kind of build your own class that Warlocks still have. And that is still a uniqueness to them. So that is still there. I
agree with that. Totally understand where you're coming from too, though, because it took me, I'm glad we didn't record the Warlock episode first. It took me, what is it, out for 2-3 weeks now, this UA? It took a while to just like sit on it and like really let it sink in. Just like, is Pact casting necessary for the Warlock? And I feel like I've landed on no, not entirely, as long as invocations still stay strong. And I'm not saying that's been met, but it's what makes the Warlock really the Warlock more than the Pact casting.
Yeah, and the Pact Boon.
And the Pact Boon, yes. We should probably
they made the Pact Boon even more impactful than they did in Fets. But yeah, we're about to say we should move on. This is getting very long.
Yes, it is. Yep. So third level, you get your subclass. We've kind of talked about that. We'll go over the subclass in a little bit here. Fourth level is the same. Fifth level, invocations. I'm actually just going to skip to when there's something interesting, and that is at 11th level where we get the contact patron. This is, in the past, you have usually contracted your patron through intermediaries. Now you can communicate directly. You always have the contact other plane spell prepared. With this feature, you can cast the spell without expending a spell slot to contact your patron, and you automatically succeed on the spell's saving throw. And you can only do this once per long rest.
So we obviously play a very different game than I guess what a lot of people play. Because at our table, our warlocks are like our warlock patrons are like main NPCs that are like a huge hand in that like character's life. They're constantly talking and going back and forth. And so now like this is trying to say you have to wait till 11 until you can actually talk to them because it's through intermittent. Like, I don't know. For us, this seems kind of like nothing.
I don't like how this prescribes a feeling to the Warlock patron instead of the current flexibility I feel in 5th edition. If you want it to be some unknown far off entity that you've got very little contact with, then you can do that in 5th edition. If you want it to be the chaotic fey entity of the forest who shows up on occasion and sits on your shoulder and says like, hey, here's an upgrade to your Eldritch Blast, you can do that. This, like, it puts a separation between that I don't love as a class feature. And I also just don't like this being a free spell once per day. Contact other plane, it feels really weird, and it's one of those that I don't know. It should be.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's either a lot or it's nothing. If you're doing the body comedy warlock thing, where you have some random dude is the warlock patron, this is garbage, worthless, useless. But if you're the patron of or the warlock of Asmodeus, the greatest of the devils,
right?
You shouldn't be able to call him every day. Not at 11th level, at least.
No, and compare it to the clerics, which often viewed as obviously a very, very powerful class, getting at 10th level the ability to contact their patron or their god, and it's like a 10% chance, or it starts off to get something from them. Now, this isn't as strong as being able to just cast a spell or whatever, but this is still really, I don't know. I think I want to just say it's heavy on the GM, and I don't like that. Where to read the part that's relevant for Contact Other Plane, on a successful save, which again you always succeed if casting this way, you can ask the entity up to 5 questions. The GM answers each question with one word: yes, no, maybe, never, irrelevant, or unclear. And if the one-word answer would be misleading, the GM might instead offer a short phrase as an answer. 5 questions every single day that the GM basically has to answer correctly. It's kind of a not fun ability for me as a GM. I don't like that.
Well, that's why unclear is there. Like, if it makes sense where that patron
then that's
wouldn't know
even
it.
worse.
Yeah,
I don't want to take away your exactly. Now I'm putting your class feature on the back burner because I don't have a good way to handle it. And those are things, it creates friction that I just am never a fan of.
Yeah. I like our way of doing it where the patrons are, for the most part, unless it's something we specifically request, accessible. And they're an NPC with personalities and motives. And it's like, obvious they're going to know some things and not others. And yeah, it's like, if you don't want whatever we're dealing with to be solved by just asking the warlock patron, you just, within role-playing conversations, come up with reasons of why not. Instead of having this weird forcing your hand thing.
Right. And like, imagine the warlock who uses Contact Other Plane every day to just completely ruin the mystery of other people's characters. I mean, now you're playing the Drake Warden, and we've got this whole thing where like your culture is centered around choosing a Drake Warden, comes once a generation, and there's all this mystery that your character is unpacking of, am I really a chosen person by the gods, or is this all just made up? And if right now our warlock could just ask their patron, who has zero connection to any of it, like, hey, what's the deal with this? Is it this? And then just keep playing 20 questions. It would absolutely just, I don't know, I would throw that warlock out. That's my wife. I'd kick her out of the game. But this is now not just here, it is almost expected to do, because it's a once a day ability. The expectation is you are using this every day and you are getting information that is supposed to help you. I don't know if I'm blowing this out of the water, or out of proportion, please tell me. But like, I feel like this is just a terribly put in class feature.
The answer is yes, but also no. It's this is either broken or it's useless. Like I said, because you can just say no 5 times as the DM. You don't have to be honest. You can just be like, no. You want to take a long rest and try that again, buddy?
Which goes to my other side of, then it's just not fun.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. It just kind of sucks. This is a feature. If you want your warlock to talk to their patron, it's better to be done outside of the mechanics of the game.
Right. And even if you want to prepare the 5th level spell, Contact Other Plane, at least there's a chance for failure. And then I'm getting a little bit less upset about it. It is hilarious.
It's a like, nasty failure too.
Because I'm just imagining the player being like, all right, everyone, hold up. I'm going to go talk to my patron real quick. And then they sit down, they cast their ritual, and then they just nose bleed, ears bleeding, eyes bleeding, pass out on the ground. And everyone's like,
there you go.
Yeah. Like it is, I mean, you have to have a greater restoration spell on on blast just to make sure, like, if they go down, I can at least fix them. There's a cost. Yeah. There's no cost to this now.
Right. Also, 5th level spell slots are just high. So
it's
free one automatically, yes.
Pass.
Oh, it is a ritual. It is. Okay.
Still, it's a very high cost. Even preparing the spell is a high cost.
Yeah.
All right. So then next, it's just invocations and subclass features up to the 18th level Hexmaster, which Will so gracefully veered us off course to talk about already. But just to make sure that Ellie and I don't have thoughts, Hex spell without expending a spell slot as often as you want. Hooray, you get Hex for free. Boo, Hex sucks.
Yeah. If it was the 5th edition version, where it's like every attack roll adds to it, maybe. Like, okay, maybe. I could see it. The fact that this takes concentration, though, still.
I say, that's what it always comes down to, is I still have better things to concentrate on at this level. Mm-hmm. And if you can't find something when you've got access to 9th level spells to concentrate on over 1d6 extra damage per turn, then I think we're playing very different games.
Yeah, like I'm already running into that issue with in my ranger with favorite foe. Like I specifically didn't take Hunter's Mark and tried to use favorite foe. I was like, no, this still takes concentration. I want to concentrate on something else.
Yeah, and I could very much see at maybe 11th level or so, I may throw you a bone and give you some magic item that removes concentration on favored foe, because I like favored foe. I like the concept of it, but I'm with you. It's like you get to that point where you're like, okay, I've only got so many combats a day. I've only got so many high level spells per day, and I kind of want to concentrate on those rather than anything else. And the concentration problem in D&D is real for players. I say it's probably one of the biggest choices you make on a regular basis.
Yeah, very much.
And now that they just busted off the limitations of Warlock, being that they have so many spells, the Mystic Arcanums, and the full arcane spell list. We kind of didn't go into that.
Yeah, that is important.
It's just the way everything works now. There are no spell lists anymore. There's a lot competing with Hex, whereas back in the day, it was a little more like, oh, Hex is a good, reliable fallback at later levels. Now it's just like, it's dog shit. There's so much out there.
Even looking at the just like 9th level spells, again, what you will have access to probably only once per day, but you'll also have an 8th level, a 7th level, a 6th level, whatever. You've got options for concentration. I mean, True Polymorph alone is going to beat out Hex every single time.
Yeah.
They could have made this 18th level capstone. At 18th level, you get rid of the Hex spell. You can never cast it again, and I wouldn't have noticed. So, that is the full class. Any full thoughts on that before we get into the Fiend subclass?
I feel like we did a pretty good job throughout of
covering
that. This is getting long. Let's move on to Fiend.
Wait!
Oh, Will.
There it is. Just...
I'm remembering why I don't let you drive me around. Yeah.
Couple of things to go over. Eldritch Blast being a Warlock spell means that it's no longer a dippable thing. It levels with your Warlock.
Oh, that is super important.
Oh, yeah.
Being the multi-class channel. Hex is the same way, not that it matters. Repelling Blast can no longer shoot everything back 10 feet. I know. It's no only large or smaller.
No more pushing Asmodeus back. Literally pushing your own patron into a pit of lava.
And he's immune to fire damage, but it was just to show
that
you
can't.
Yeah.
Why'd I give you that?
I take it back.
But other than that, there's not a whole lot. So they did tweak a few things that were just a little bit broken.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I would like to see some additional tweaks to the invocations. Some of them aren't worthwhile as invocations. I mean, I still cannot see a reason to take Otherworldly Leap. You can cast Jump on yourself without expending a spell slot or material components. I don't care.
Yeah, I'm a ninth level prereq.
9th level or higher. Are you kidding me? I think what I want to see are a half invocation rework. where some things that do just give you a first level spell, give me a little something else on the side. Whispers of the Grave, I think, is an easy one to go off of. You can cast Speak with Dead without expending a spell slot. Okay, how often am I casting Speak with Dead? Maybe I'm using it in a weird world once per day. I don't know why I am using it once per day, but let's say I am. Then great, I've got Speak with Dead. I had to spend an entire invocation to get there. Totally not worth it. Maybe though, if that was, you can cast Speak with Dead without expending a spell slot, and once per turn you can add 1d6 necrotic damage to your cantrip or melee attack. Okay, now I might take that, because now I don't have to concentrate on Hex, and it's giving me just about the same thing. Obviously, that's more of an issue with Hex, but regardless, I think they should look at some of these that are giving you these just first level spells, or even up to fourth level spells, and consider a little extra spice on top of them to make them feel worthwhile.
I agree with the concept. That specific example, I think, is a bit much, because like you have entire class features that do that. Like,
it is an entire class feature. Invocations are entire class features.
That's true. Okay.
So, I mean, but that's fine.
Either way, though, we don't
need
need a. Yeah, we're not balancing this right now. I'm just.
Right.
I like the designing. Yeah.
Yeah, like Disguise Self, you can cast it without expending a spell slot. That's Mask of Many Faces. How about we also get?
Actually, I think that one's a lot of fun, and that doesn't have any prereqs.
But I would
think
throw
a lot of
like
these are a lot of fun.
Yeah,
I think getting like Minor Illusion or something would be cool. Something else. I don't know. I feel like it's, while yes, you're going to take it, it still just doesn't feel like it's got so much weight to it that I'm like, whoa, this is going to be used all the time.
I think this will be worse when they inevitably power boost these with a new infusion of invocations like they did previously, and you're like, oh shit, these are dope. These new ones are crazy.
Yeah, that's, I guess, what I'd like to see avoided. But we'll see. All right, let's get into the Fiend Patron. There were a good bit of changes here, starting off at third level with Patron Spells. So the Patron Spells replace the expanded spell list. I'm just going to read the design notes here because I think it summarizes it perfectly. Rather than merely expanding your spell list, Patron Spells gives you certain spells that you always have prepared, and once per long rest, you can cast one of those spells without a spell slot. The list of spells has also been updated. So that is pretty huge. Instead of more known spells, you get more known spells and additional spells cast.
Well, it wasn't even known spells before. It was spells that you were allowed to pick.
You're right.
Like, it was even worse than that. It was such a stupid feature. Like, this is a lot better way to handle it. Just like, because it's so common with casters. Like, you pick the subclass, here's these special spells you just have.
Yeah, the spells on the... Oh, did you have something to add?
I think we were about to say the same thing. Yeah, the free spell. The free once per long rest.
So it's one of your prepared spells from this feature without expending a spell slot. One thing I don't like about that is the fact that as your list obviously expands, you're still only limited to one from that list, which feels okay. But you're getting stuff at 3rd, 5th, 9th, 13th, and 17th. All of the spells are pretty good. I don't think there's any like big... I was going to say there's no big stinkers on there, but Stinking Cloud is at 9th level. So
that spell's bad.
Suggestion has situational use, but I don't worry about situational ones when you get one of them for free. That's actually just kind of nice. I don't like Flame Strike being on there. Flame Strike does fire and radiant damage, and this is the Fiend spell. It's taken from the priest spell list. What is that called? Divine spell list. Thank you. So I think that's super weird. Also, Flame Strike just kind of isn't great. We've talked about that in the past as well. But otherwise, I think this is a pretty good list.
Yeah, solid list.
Dark One's Blessing is also at 3rd level and has a pretty nice boost here. So before it was when you reduce an enemy to 0 HP, you gain temp HP equal to your spellcasting ability modifier plus warlock level. Now it's when you and just any enemy drops to 0 HP within 5 feet of you, you gain temp HP. There's tons of times where when you were playing a Fiend Warlock, where you'd be like, nobody touch this one. If you touch this one, I'm going to be pissed. I need to finish the kill. And that's just not always great gameplay. It was funny, but not great gameplay.
And this jives actually really well with the Pact of the Blade. When you're in melee combat, this is going to be proccing way more than if you were standing in the back. So,
and you're going to need it more when you're in melee.
Oh yeah.
Dark One's own luck can now be used a number of times equal to your spellcasting ability modifier rather than once per rest. Dark One's luck has not changed otherwise. When you make an ability check or saving throw, you can use this feature to add a d10 to your roll. You can do so after seeing the initial roll, but before any of the roll's effects occur. I think this is good to tie to spellcasting ability modifier to make sure that it's not as multi-classing abusable like with proficiency bonus. Overall, good change. Then we've got Fiendish Resilience. So this is channeling the preternatural resilience of fiends. You can choose one damage type other than force. Whenever you finish a short rest or long rest, you gain resistance to that damage type until you choose a different one with this feature. This design note's no longer bypassed by magic or silvered weapons, which monsters almost never possess. Also,
you know what monsters do
this.
possess now?
Force damage.
Force damage.
Yeah.
That's a good point. That's a good point. So this actually could almost be viewed as a nerf from that perspective. But it's so
no,
hard
it can't
when you're choosing a
because
damage type.
It's not a nerf because it's an entire reevaluation of how damage works in the game.
Yeah.
So everything is subjected essentially to this new force paradigm. I don't know.
Yeah.
You got rid of magic and now it's force damage, which
that might come up more with our barbarian discussion. We'll see. Because that obviously affects them, the whole force change. Then lastly, we've got Hurl Through Hell, which is like the coolest class feature ever. So when you hit a creature with an attack roll, you can use this feature to instantly transport the target through the lower planes. They disappear and hurtle through a nightmare landscape. At the end of your next turn, the target returns. If the target is not a fiend, it must make a wisdom saving throw against your spell save on its return. On a failed save, the target takes 10d10 psychic damage. On a success, it takes half as much. So it used to be you could only do this on a long rest. Now it's once per long rest for free, and then you can expend a spell slot of at least 4th level to use it again. You can only do it once per turn.
Yeah, and they added a save for damage before it was just automatic.
Oh, yeah, that is pretty big.
Yeah, yeah.
And makes sense. I don't think this should be just free. I think the fact that it's free to get a target out of combat for an entire round is plenty.
No, it's actually kind of nuts because Banishment is a 4th level spell, which is theoretically a minute concentration. But you can the DM has ways to say, no, you can't do that to this enemy.
Right.
They don't actually have that with Hurl Through Hell. You just
nope. Even if it's the big boss.
Going through hell. Sorry, buddy.
Yep.
Now you can do it again and again and again and again as long as you have 4th level spell slots.
Which you're not going to have a ton of.
Which you're not going to have a lot of, but you can still... It's just such a good ability, and now that you can do it more than once, it's so cruel to your DM.
So at 14th level, you have 1 4th level spell slot, so you'd be able to do this twice. Then at most, you get 3 4th level spell slots. Obviously, you can use a 5th if you want to. There's no benefit to using a 5th, though. So you can get this 4 to 5 to at most 6 times a day. But you know what? 6 times a day, 10d10 damage, taking an enemy out of combat for an entire round without a save. That actually sounds pretty worth it, even up to high levels. But this is a subclass capstone, so I don't know. I'm on the fence. I think it's good. It might be a little bit too powerful, but...
I've never once looked at a Warlock feature and said, that's too much. But for real... With the theoretical, you can do this 6 times in a row. If you have one big bad enemy, it's going to hell. 6 times in a row. There's nothing it can do.
Yeah, I think my gut tells me that wisdom save should be beforehand and that the damage just happens regardless. And then if they succeed, they don't get hurled through hell. But I don't know.
That's actually why Hurl Through Hell was so friggin' cool, is because it never didn't work.
Right.
Every single time you did it, they were hurled through hell. Now there's a save for damage, but they're still hurled through hell. It's still cool. But you're right. They kind of, being able to do this over and over again, it's just mean-spirited.
Yeah, overall, I really like the new Fiend. They just tuned up nicely. It's not a complete redesign. They just like each level's really solid now. It feels like, and you just get cool stuff. And now this is a character I would want to play. A Fiend Warlock who picked Pact of the Blade, sporting medium armor, dual wielding weapons, up in melee, attacking things, and they get a bunch of like AoE fire spells to hurl out when needed, regaining 10 hit points, being able to reroll save or add D10 to saves. It just feels like it would be just a solid class and concept that feels good to play. Where before the Fiend felt like a little, a weak. Like you didn't get much at the first level feature because you had to reduce, and then just the expanded spell list versus actual spells known, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think this is just an overall increase across the board. The only thing I have any hangups on is the hurl through hell power. But
yeah,
as Will said, there's no such thing as a warlock feature that's too powerful. That's just fact. I think that their 17th level ability or 18th, whatever, should be that they just get wish. That would be ridiculous as a capstone, wouldn't it?
It also should be a cantrip.
Yeah, that seems valid. All right, that is it. I'm not surprised this turned into a longer one. The Warlock is such a tangled mess of spaghetti. Thank you, as always, to our patrons. Your names are in front of me, and I am delaying for different reasons. Thank you, as always, to our patrons: Cameron C., Ed G., Craig A., Brian H., Isaac M., Jeff W., Star Shinobi, McKinnon T., Vincent M., Barents, Bob F., Gray, Joe P., Muddleweight, Rick D., Senthil D20, Tyler S., Adam A., Rob K., and Sir Laugh-A-Lot. You all are fantastic, and if you want to check out the Patreon, you can get early access to episodes like most of the time. And if you want to support the show in other ways, head on over to monstersmulticlass.com/support, where you can find our wonderful affiliates like Fanroll Dice, where you can save 10% off your dice order by using the code MM10, dice and dice accessories. They're all really, really pretty. Go check them out. And I think that's it.
Yeah. As always, thanks for watching.